Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call, Mrs. Burns, please.
Mr. Congdon?
Here.
Ms. Boyle?
Here.
Mr. Burnett?
Here.
Mr. Feather?
Here.
Mrs. Hallenbeck? Mr. Morris?
Here.
Mr. Parentano?
Here.
Mr. Rudy?
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan?
Present.
The quorum is present.
Thank you. I ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone. Prior to this meeting, we had an executive session. We spoke matters of employment and potential and/or current litigation matters. Any announcements, Mrs. Burns?
No announcements.
Superintendent's report. Mr. Jones, please.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Superintendent's report includes items such as the following: a recognition of the fire prevention efforts at our elementary school. We had a nice posting about the effort on our Facebook page, and one of our parents responded how effective it was that their child came home and wanted to know not just what's their primary plan, but what's their secondary plan for exit out of the house, just in case. And so that's a really good effort on the part of our staff to make sure that we include that at this time of the year. We had a whole variety of activities happening at all of our elementary schools, and we want to thank our local firefighters for their support getting out to the schools and helping the students understand the concerns and the importance of being ready. We had also an interesting Penn State extension program where there was a delivery of eggs that ultimately hatched into chicks, and so I think it was our third graders. Our third grade students at Pearl Buck had a really wonderful experience from a science perspective, but also able to incorporate that into some of their other subject areas in terms of their writing and the like, and it was a nice activity for the teachers and for the students there at Pearl Buck. I'm announcing for you a reminder that the Neshaminy High School's 25th annual Kaleidoscope of Bands is going to take place at the end of this month. Actually, it's this Saturday, October 28th, 7 o'clock start. And it's an exciting endeavor. Our band does a lot to showcase the school district, the high school, and also ends up performing at the end of the program as well. And so we invite you out. The tickets are $5 for students, $10 for adults. The report talks about a whole variety of fundraising activities that our students participate in as part of service opportunities and the like, including Hoover's annual Penny for Paws, and they raise money for a local animal shelter. Great opportunity, great work there. A Race for Education at Hoover as well. Penn State Extension Program. The annual Pink Out fundraiser raised $6,000 this year. Our Neshaminy Roadies at the high school raised money, $4,200 for breast cancer research. And there's an upcoming fundraiser activity, which is our local Neshaminy Education Foundation. They hold a Dining for Dollars event, and that happens always around election time, so Monday and Tuesday. Let me get the right dates. November 6th and 7th. You can go to Bertucci's from 11 a.m. till 10 p.m. You could get lunch and dinner if you'd like. Both of those days, and 15% of all sales will go to the Neshaminy Education Foundation. The only other item I have here, I'm actually going to wait because Mrs. Foley is back here from Maple Point with a couple of students, and they're going to cover the last topic that was in my report. Caitlin Barron and Nikki DiMatteo. Who's speaking first? All right, Caitlin, come on up. Caitlin, there's a button right there. You press that, it'll turn red, and you can go.
Good evening. I'm Caitlin Barron.
And I am Nick DiMatteo.
Maple Point Middle School will be holding its annual Veterans Day ceremony on Thursday, November 9th, 2017. This is a wonderful way for our students and community to show appreciation for the sacrifices that our local veterans have made and to celebrate the courage our veterans have shown in defending our country.
The Maple Point staff and students would like to invite veterans to our community to attend the celebration at Maple Point Middle School the morning of November 9th. Attendees should arrive at the auditorium lobby at 11 a.m. for refreshments and registration. The ceremony will begin at 11:30 a.m. Veterans who are interested in attending should contact Maple Point Middle School at 215-809-6230 or register in the main office at Maple Point. Thank you.
I said to Nick and Caitlin, they brought their family with them. I'm less concerned about their family, more about them getting home for homework. This is a great time if you'd like to sneak out. Thank you so much for coming out this evening.
Thanks, Mr. Jones.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. That's all, Mr. Godwin.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we're going to move to public comment. Once again, we're going to keep it to 3 minutes. Please state your name, area you reside, your profession. Please, no personal attacks.
Steve Rodas.
Good evening. I'm Steve Rodas. I live in the Villages of Flowers Mill in Langhorne. I didn't really know which of the categories that this would come under, but it has to do with education, so I figured this is a good enough place to start. I unfortunately missed the educational development meeting last week, but the state assessments came out and they were printed, and in past years you had at a general board meeting some explanation of what it was that came out. On a personal level, I'm not overly enthused about the scores that came out, but I know that they changed everything. And my rule of thumb is that basically you should do a lot better than the state averages because we have a lot of school districts, and I don't know how they measure the average. I don't know if they do it by school district, however they do it. And I know the fifth grade historically is worse than other grades for some reason in the entire state and throughout the districts. So I would like the public to hear something about the new curricular instructional initiatives and how they'll tie in to the assessments and the courses. Thank you.
Nicole Weber.
Hi, I'm Nicole Weber. I live in Quincy Hollow. I'm one of the moms from Our Lady of Grace, touching on the school nurse issue. First, I do want to thank you, Mr. Jones, for meeting with us and kind of rectifying the issue. Monday and Wednesdays, we do have a nurse for a couple hours. It was hit or miss on whether we have this nurse for the rest of the year, whether we don't have this nurse for the rest of the year, whether it's just screenings. I know it was going back and forth with Denise and Anthony. I'm not sure if this is a Band-Aid situation, but this is also something that I'm still finding inappropriate for our students. I had two estimates for what it costs to educate a Neshaminy student between $13,000 and $18,000. We have 600 students in Our Lady Grace and Holy Family. You're talking between $7 and $11 million that we're saving Neshaminy School District by sending our kids to Our Lady of Grace. We have 600 students. You're talking 1 to 2 parent homes, $8,400 to $1,600 in school taxes that we're paying. 600 students per this $7, that's $4,200 in reimbursement from the Department of Health. I mean, these are approximate numbers. We have, again, an estimate for it costs $25 an hour for a nurse, 6 hours a day, $150 a day, $750 a week. We're asking $27,000 per school for a school nurse. I spoke to Susan Templin with the Department of Health. She's under the assumption that with you guys receiving this reimbursement, that Neshaminy School District is agreeing to the terms with supplying a nurse, and it's not just screenings, it's conducting all health needs. We have a student at Our Lady of Grace who receives her narcotic during the day. That would be something that would fall under a nurse. We are not, I understand, we're having a hard time with the giving $5 million for an HVAC system for the tech school when we're asking for $27,000 for a school nurse, and it's comfort versus safety. Your mission statement is all people have the right to a safe and healthy environment. So my question is, why was this decision made to pull the nurse out of the school? Why wasn't an assessment done prior to that? Why wasn't the board involved with this decision? And why, or whoever made this decision, why do they feel that our students at Our Lady of Grace and Holy Family should be exempt from the Neshaminy School District's mission statement? That is it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had Irene lean over on the first speaker, lean over and talk to me in regards to, I know that the way they scored the tests did change a year or two ago. I don't know what the exact date was, but we were told up front to be prepared to watch the test scores drop by more than 10% or something like that. I can remember during one of the meetings that we had a year or two ago that they said they were changing the way they grade the system. So like a D is actually a C now, and a C is actually a B now. So like they lowered the standards. But Irene has some information as well. She leaned over and said, so I'm going to let her speak.
I was just going to say that it's unfortunate that you weren't able to come to the meeting because it was presented in detail. And I'd like to say, based on my recollection, we did above the state average in every category. And so I'm sure that we could arrange to have a presentation at one of the board meetings so that everybody can hear what was said at the committee meeting. Would you like? No? Gloria? Gloria?
Feel free if you'd like to come up and give some.
Gloria,
We can do that in a future meeting if you desire.
well, that's what I was saying. But I just wanted to correct that misunderstanding, Chris.
All right, at this time, we're going to move on to Section 2, routine matters. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes, treasurer's report, check register, and procurement, card purchases, budget transfers, investments, and exonerations. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Sullivan with the second. Do we have any questions, comments, or concerns on items 2.01 through 2.06?
I have one question. On investments, Mrs. Markowitz, and I apologize for not getting this to you earlier. The investments that are on, that are shown, the 4 investments that are shown, are these short-term instruments that we're currently using, or are these line items that we could consider at a later date when we look into the new program put out by the state to allow us to seek better rates of return?
Yeah, the maturity dates, they're from September through November, so they're basically short-term.
So these particular investments, would they fall into the category that we would be able to explore the new state regulations regarding investment instruments, or we would need to use some longer-term securities?
No, I believe they also have some short-term. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Items 2.01 through 2.06. Be it there none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 9-0. We're going to go on to the personnel certificated. Items 3.01 to 3.06, retirements, leaves of absence, tenure awards, appointments, co-curricular resignations, co-curricular appointments. I'd like to make a motion for items 3.01 through 3.06. Can I get a second, please? Second. Mr. Rudy with a second. Any questions, comments, or concerns on those items? Be it there none, all in favor? Oh, do you have a question?
Just one comment. I'm entrusting that the administration here on 3.06 that these candidates are working the job and not working their extracurricular activities simultaneously, as you know, that has happened in the past, but it's has been corrected several years ago. I'm just making sure that it's well noted that you can only do one job at once, and it's not done on school time. That's it.
You're correct, Mr. Morris, and I will just double-check, make sure that that is, as we are carrying these out, I expect that that is the case, and you'll find that to be true, but I will just make sure that message is conveyed.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Be it there none. Items 3.01 through 3.06, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 9-0. Support personnel, Ms. Hollenbeck, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve items 4.01 through 4.06, retirements, resignations, leaves of absence, appointments, co-curricular resignations, co-curricular appointments, and ancillary appointments.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please? Mr. Burnett with a second. Any questions, comments, or concerns on items 4.01 through 4.06? Be it there none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Those items pass 9-0. Item 4.07, personnel support, Ms. Hollenbeck, please.
Resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the appointment of Rebecca Kurtz as Transportation Supervisor at a salary of $67,000 prorated for the current 2017/18 school year to begin when released from her current assignment and contingent upon submission of approved clearances.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please? Second. Mr. Parentano, any questions, comments, or concerns? Be it there none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so then we're going to go to roll call.
Ms. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Feather?
No.
Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Aye.
Mr. Parentano?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
I abstain.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have an explanation on the abstention, please?
Yes, I am.
Hit the button, please.
Sorry. I am indirectly related to the candidate. She's married to my brother-in-law.
Thank you. All right, so we have all the votes in. We have, was it 7, 1, and 1? Yes. 7 ayes. Okay. 1 no and 1 abstention. Education Development, Ms. Boyle, please.
I'm making a motion to approve 5.01, which is overnight trips, and 5.02, which is the American Education Week.
Thank you for that motion. Can I get a second, please? Second. Ms. Hollenbeck with the second. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Yes, Mr. Congdon, would it be appropriate that we could read 502 into the record instead of as a group?
I don't have a problem with that. I'm not reading it, though. Miss Irene Boyle is.
Well, that's okay. Okay. So it's a great public schools, a basic right and our responsibility. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, public schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And let me see. Whereas public education employees work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism, and whereas public schools are community catalysts, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common enterprise. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby proclaims November 13th to 17th, 2017 as the 96th annual observance of American Education Week.
Thank you. And we had a second on that, I believe. Who got the second? Ms. Hollenbach got the second. All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on that?
I would like to make a comment related to a basic right with regard to our democracy. We are a representative republic. We are not a democracy in this country.
Anyone else? Okay, be it there. No more questions, comments, or concerns. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. All right, roll call. Mrs. Burns, please.
Ms. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Feather?
No.
Mrs. Hallenbeck? Yes. Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Parentano?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Present. All right. Going to move on to business operations. Ms. Hollenbeck, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve items 6.01 through 6.04, which is the comprehensive plan, contract for food services, playground donation, and out-of-district placements.
Thank you for that motion. Can I get a second, please? Mr. Rudy with the second. I'm sorry, Irene. We'll get you on the next one. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Again, Mr.
Hold on a second.
Congdon,
Hold on a second.
may we read number 6.03 into the record to give the donating group the attention
Recognition they
deserve.
deserve.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And once again, Ms. Hollenbeck, could you, actually not once again, but could you read that, 6.03, please?
Whereas the Pearl Buck PTO has offered to donate a full playground unit from Game Time Playcore Company, including the complete installation of the playground equipment, rubberized curbing, and safety play surface, and whereas the playground specifications, layout, and overall design plan detailing the installation at Pearl Buck Elementary has been reviewed and approved by the district's Director of Operations. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy School Board of Directors hereby approves to accept the aforementioned donations from the Pearl Buck PTO.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have a comment. I would hope that the permits would go through very quickly down in Lower Southampton. And if this playground,
Middletown.
this
Middletown.
Pearl Buck, I'm sorry. Yeah, Pearl Buck. And the recycled material is a rubber mat, and it doesn't have any wire in it. That I know it sounds crazy, but there are some issues out there with that. As long as it's been inspected, that's great. Thank you.
All right, any others? Be it there none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? I believe items 6.01 through 6.04 were approved 9-0. Policy, Ms. Boyle, please. If you'd like.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve 7.01, which is the second reading of policy, and 7.02, which is retirement of existing NSD policy. And I think 7.01, okay, is whereas the first reading of policy series 000, local board procedures, was read at the public works session on October 10th, 2017. And whereas the following policies are being recommended by the Policy Committee for board adoption into the Neshaminy School District Policy Manual. I say 003 is functions, 004 membership, 005 organization, 006 meetings, 006.1 attendance at meetings via electronic conferencing, 006.2 is recording of board meetings, 007 is policy manual access, 011 is principles for governance and leadership, 012 is memoranda of understanding, contracts, and bids, and 013 is budget commitment. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the policies listed above for adoption as part of Policy Series 000, Local Board Procedures in the Neshaminy School District Policy Manual.
Thank you. And that's the motion. Now I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Parentano with the second. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
This is for both or just for the first one?
It's for both.
I thought it was just the first. She put both out and read just the first.
Both of them are involved with this.
I would ask that we separate them out since there's some confusion.
Steve, when will you learn? You can tell us that before we go ahead and do this.
That the concerns rating. I'm sorry.
No.
Right, and I would ask that we vote 7.01 first, and then during 7.02, in the comment period, explain the concerns that was expressed by some members to justify our process on that motion.
All right, so with Steve, we have a motion that Irene put on the floor for two items. I'm going to make a motion within this motion to remove item 7.02. Can I get a second on that? Thank you, Marty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 9-0. All right, so the motion that is on the floor right now that Steve seconded is 7.01, which is the motion that Irene just read. Any questions, comments, concerns on 7.01?
My only question is where in here, because I couldn't find it, was what we added at the first reading.
0.013.
Any other questions? Okay, be it there none. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we're going to have to do a roll call. Mrs. Burns, please.
Ms. Boyle?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Congdon?
Present, yes.
Mr. Feather? Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
No.
Mr. Parentano?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Boyle, if you could continue and do a motion for 7.02, please.
Make a motion to approve 7.02, which is retirement of existing NSD policy.
Thank you. Can I get a second on that? Mr. Burnett with the second. Any questions, comments, concerns on that item?
I would just like to verify what I had asked in executive session in regards to these policies will be archived so that we can still get to them and the public can still have access to them if they want to refer to what's old and what's new.
Yes, and we can do that. We have a section on our website with some archived information. It'd be easy to add this to that.
Any other questions? Be it there none. All in favor? Opposed? All right. Roll call, Mrs. Burns. We're keeping you busy tonight.
Ms. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Feather? Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
No.
Mr. Parentano?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan? 7 yes, 2 no.
All right. Thank you. All right. We don't have anything more to vote on, which is. Do we have any other board business? Anybody on the board or the administration like to bring up something for other board business?
I'd like to add the other board business.
Mr. Steve Parentano.
Bringing our fellow board members as well as our community up to date. As you know, the PSBE, the Pennsylvania School Board Association, sponsors various functions throughout the year to help us as school board directors be better stewards of our community. This year they had their annual conference in Harrisburg, by which they had a forum which the two chairs of the Education Committee attended. Both the minority chair and the majority chair were in attendance for about an hour. They fielded questions from PSBA members as well as the moderator, who was a PCN moderator. And for anybody that has PCN and is interested, they do have a replay. If you go to PCN's website and look for Future of PA Education, they'll have the replay. As a school board member, I was unfortunately discouraged by the comments made at this discussion, and unfortunately those comments all center around funding, which is always the issue that haunts us all. Sentiments expressed by both the minority chair and the majority chair seem to be aligned with the fact that school boards need to do a better job, need to be more responsible for their budgets, need to be more responsible for their contracts. Maybe in their school districts, but not here in Neshaminy. In Neshaminy, we've done, I feel, an excellent job over trying to right the ship. We have great professionals who work here. We provide, I think, a tremendous amount of opportunities for our kids within a budget that our taxpayers can afford to support. But it's becoming ever more and more difficult to support that budget. There was no talk about pension reform. There was no talk about labor reforms, the two things that could help school districts, manage and taxpayers to afford. The message seemed to be that, you're on your own. You just got about as much funding as you're going to get. It was, a shame to hear that. I can understand their frustration in trying to always fund it, but they have to understand our frustration in trying to provide for it. We're the ones that are on the front lines, trying to make sure our children are educated properly, can go out into the world and become productive citizens. And, for all the love and hard work that everybody puts behind it, unfortunately, it doesn't happen unless there's dollars to make it work. And, I hate to always bring things down to dollars, but that's what it's about. This state has always had an issue with funding education, and it all revolves around this statement. Article 3, Section 14 of the Pennsylvania State Constitution. The public school system, the General Assembly, shall provide for the maintenance and support of a thorough and efficient system of public education to serve the needs of the Commonwealth. Recently, there's been another lawsuit that's been filed on the behalf of citizens of Pennsylvania against the General Assembly that made it all the way up to the state Supreme Court. There was an affirmative response, I believe, by the state court, not on the motions, but to redirect it back to Commonwealth Court to have them look at the issue again to see if they're going to come up with a different answer. Currently, the Commonwealth Court has maintained that the General Assembly, as outlined in the Constitution, is the one that decides how the system is funded. I have no problem with that. Other people seem to and seem to feel that the court system is a way to circumvent the Constitution to see how those dollars are redirected. If the Supreme Court makes that decision, so be it, and we'll be have to follow in whatever that guidance is. The property tax system. I own a house. I know almost everybody sitting here owns a house. Everybody hates to pay property taxes. And I wish mine were lower, and I wish I never had to raise them. But property taxes provide for a level funding base that we can make year-to-year determinations on to provide education. The state has a constitutional, I don't think it's a state, it's a group that has a constitutional amendment on the ballot coming up in November to try and change the system from a property tax system to a user tax system. The only thing I can say for those that are considering voting in an affirmative of that is be careful what you wish for. The state has not outlined in that question how they intend to, what taxes they would institute to replace the property tax that would be circumvented. And in that system, the debt of your school district is exempt from those new taxes and will remain on a property tax basis. So before we jump to that system, I would hope that someone could lay out exactly what they plan to do, what taxes they plan to raise, and how much it's going to cost everybody to replace the property tax system. Also, Senate Bill 2 was defeated in committee. today, as a matter of fact. Senate Bill 2 would have continued to redirect funds that are raised by local school districts to other programs. Whether you agree with the way school choice is practiced or not in this Commonwealth, the traditional public schools, Neshaminy, has to carry all the legacy costs that are associated with public education, while the new ventures that the state wants to explore and fund it, they exempt from that. Now, Neshaminy still provides an education for every single student that walks in the door. Walks in our doors, no matter what, if they're between the ages of I believe it's 6 and 21, Neshaminy doesn't have a lottery. You don't get picked. You get the education we provide, and we provide a very high quality education and support services for those students. So all these great ideas that are on the table, I applaud people for coming up with them, putting them forward. But before you disrupt the entire public transportation system, that was good, public education system, we better be sure of how we're going to continue to fund it at least the same level. I'm not saying more, at least the same level. Otherwise, we're shortchanging every one of our children in this Commonwealth, and they're not going to be the productive citizens that we hope them to be. They are the future. I always say, thank God for the generation that was before us, that provided for us, that we could have what we have, and we always have to make sure that we continue to provide for the next generation. So I ask all my members to, if you have a chance, to see if you can view that replay. I think you'll find it interesting. There were some positive things. I hate to just hit on the negative things, but that did the funding did take up the majority of the conference, and for the public too. You can see how challenging it's becoming in Pennsylvania. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Steve, I want to say, we're in other board business. I want to thank you, for the time that you put in to actually view that, because the PCN channel, as we all know, is a very interesting channel. But you've taken the time, and I want to praise you for that. I've heard you take negative criticism in the past, and you've taken it well. But I must say, Steve, that when you take on a responsibility, you do your best to get the information, to be able to deliver information to your fellow board members in the way that you do with this situation with the PSBA. I applaud you and thank you for bringing that information to us. You take the time to do that, and I very much appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on. If there's any, you have other board business? Mr. Morris, please. Board comment or board business? This is board business, or do you want to do it for? Go ahead.
Mr. Paratano, I have to say you're hitting the nail right on the head here with this school funding. This school funding issue that the state's going to try to work out here, I believe it's a shell game. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And when you're looking at the entire state, as you hear the meetings and the conferences going on, you probably would have to agree to that, because now here we are in Neshaminy, keeping everything lean, trying to improve education, improve our buildings, and doing things what we feel fit for us. Just as the state budget, they're in a deficit. And I just warned the public and the voters that that's all that's going to happen. That money's going to get vacuumed out of here. The educational system in Neshaminy will disintegrate little by little, because that money will just never come back to us. They wouldn't be taking it if they didn't need it. You can't fill that vacuum up there in Harrisburg enough. They'll take the money. They have other school districts they're going to feed it to, which has millions and millions and millions of dollars in the hole. They knew it 30 years ago, and they still keep dumping money into it. And there's a few of them. So please do not vote for this just because, you want to say yes to something for Harrisburg. It's like throwing money at the federal government. It's a vacuum. All they do is take money. Keep it local, keep it to your elected officials, the superintendent that you know, the teachers, administrators that you know, to do what's right for you. Because as you see, the state's not sending their money back to us that they should be, and they won't. And it's not going to continue. They're going to take our money and they're going to replace it. The smaller districts will do fine. We will not. So please do not vote for that. Thank you for the help, Steve.
I asked to jump in only for clarification purposes here. And there's a lot happening at the state. As has been discussed here, the state has passed the spending side, but not the revenue side for the budget. The state has a brand-new school code that they've discussed, but haven't moved, and that's going to impact us. The state had a voucher proposal that came up out of nowhere over the weekend. I know a number of us did reach out to our state legislators, and that was good because there was a decision that we believe to be more positive for Neshaminy. The one thing I do want to clarify, though, is that the constitutional amendment, understandably, is being a little confused with what was a legislative effort last year to replace property tax with sales tax and income tax. Now, what's on the ballot for November 7th is an amendment to allow for property tax to be reduced instead of the 50% threshold to 100%. It feels like it has a connection, but in reality, it actually doesn't. That all being said, what you two gentlemen said, record it, save it, because it feels like it's an annual effort to return back to this question of, is property tax the right vehicle, and should we be looking at something else? It was an SB 76 bill last year, and they say that number seems to be the number they keep assigning to it year after year. So my point is that everything that was said is valid, with the one exception that what's being voted on here doesn't make that shift happen. This amendment is really just to allow for, if there were funds to reduce taxes, that they could be reduced beyond the 50% threshold. Those funds don't exist, and there'd have to be new legislation to do what it is that the concern is about.
And also, that would probably take several years, if not 3 to 4 to 5 years, before it got through committee.
It's really hard to say, because last year, a lot of us were reaching out to legislators at that time because it felt like they were trying to make that type of move almost like immediately, even though that timeline didn't make sense. So, it really is, this is a time for us to stay aware, to try to keep ourselves apprised of all that's happening, but things happen quickly in Harrisburg sometimes, probably somewhat by design at times, and so it is important to stay as invested in knowing what's out there, what's impacting schools, and how we can best help guide that. And the best way to do that is to make phone calls, to reach out to our local legislators. They listen to you as taxpayers. They listen to board members. So they even listen to me every once in a while. At least they take my phone call. But it is important for us to continue to talk about what's important to the Neshaminy community and how some decisions that we made in Harrisburg, far removed from the local school, do have some significant impact. So I do appreciate that. I know Mr. Paratano, amongst others, reached out to Senator Tomlinson just the other day because of that voucher too, and Senator Tomlinson was a vote that did not get that bill to come out of the committee, so that was good for us, and so all good.
I left that out of my remarks. I wanted to remember to commend Senator Tomlinson, and Senator Tomlinson is a former school board member. So he has a keen aware of what it takes to make the schools work. And even though I know he generally wants to support, similar measures, he knows what it takes to run a school district. And he knows how bad this would be. 4 terms. School board member? 4-term school board member. God bless him.
All right. Any other board business? Anybody else? No? Okay. At this time, we're going to move to our second portion of public comment. We don't have a sign-up sheet, so if you'd like to just please approach the podium. Please state your name, area you reside, your profession. Please, no personal attacks. We limit it to 3 minutes once again. Mr. Rodas, please.
Hello again. Steve Rodas and Flowers Mill. I have a couple of questions, and it's kind of, it shows a reason why some people are having a lot of trouble with somebody's following the policies. Because if you want to know what the policy is now, you have to get a copy of the policy. You have to go to the policy committee meetings. Now, which is not a bad idea. Unfortunately, I couldn't make them in the last month, but the second half, 7.02, retires existing policies. What happens to these policies? They're just gone? Or is somebody else controlling contracts and bids? How does that, I mean, that was never explained. So, there's advisory groups, there's long-term service awards. I know there's a bunch of things maybe that shouldn't be in policy, but as of right now, they're nowhere?
Steve, during board comments, I'll go through the procedure.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I wanted to say is it's very rare that I could agree with Steve Paratano and Mike Morris at the same time. But I really, on this issue, I really do. Because, I never had a lot of faith in the state of Pennsylvania doing the right thing. Steve brought up the question of them changing the investment guidelines. Well, it's great if you can get better returns, but the state managed to screw up the teachers' pensions investments by paying out tremendous amounts of money to so-called advisors. Some school districts, some places have just said, well, we're just going to go to mutual funds that charge no load. So I don't have a lot of faith in Pennsylvania for ever doing the right thing, unless they're individually, personally involved. But that's not an indictment of them. I would never do such a thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Hi, I'm Scott Heaney, Vice President of NESPA. I also work at transportation. I just wanted to bring up, Neshaminy's always talking about saving money. 2 years ago, we had a supervisor retire. I think she was making approximately $63,000 a year. Since then, we've lost about 30% of our drivers, and the new candidate coming up is going to be making 67. I don't see where they're saving any money from doing this. I also didn't see on the agenda where this announcement was going to be made, if there's an addendum or anything. Okay. I've witnessed myself, your candidate tell somebody that they will crush their world and destroy this person. So I hope you think long and hard. Will we be without a supervisor until she has finished her obligations? Or when will we have a supervisor? Starting when? Will it be July 1st? And is it just going to be for Neshaminy? Or is she getting paid to supervise everybody? And if so, is somebody else going to help pay that salary? So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I couldn't agree more with the two of you speaking.
Please, I'm sorry. Can you? We need to be official for our bookkeeping
Nicole
here.
Weber, Our Lady of Grace.
Thank you.
As the two of you were speaking, you pretty much made our point. We are not only saving you money, we're paying taxes, and also you're receiving reimbursement, and yet you still took the school nurse out of our school. So where is the justification in that? you guys, you want people to fight for Neshaminy School District to get what you need for your school, and yet our nurse was taken out. It was just pretty much used as a budget cut. The safety of our students, it was used as a budget cut, and yet you guys are being reimbursed, and we also pay taxes. So I want to thank you for making our point also.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you to everyone in the public. We're going to move now to section 8.03, board comment.
I'd like to.
Ms. Hollenbeck?
I would just like to remind everybody that there is a budget operations meeting tomorrow in this room at 6:30.
Thank you.
I want to, first of all, thank Nick and Caitlin for coming up and talking about our program they have at Maple Point every year for the veterans. It's a great program, and the school does a fantastic job of showing our veterans that we care and appreciate their service. Mr. Rodas, on the policy, I think you were absent for both those meetings. You were away. You were normally there at every meeting, so we did miss you. One meeting, we had 0 people in attendance, so it was, we missed you, all I can say. We're taking on a new format. The policies are being changed into a PSBA format. This is something that started last year, but now we're coming to the point where it's being implemented. We started with original section 100, and those policies have been converted to 003 using what the PSBA section format is. It's a little confusing. It's even confusing for us. But some of the things that were in 100, if you follow strictly by the PSBA guidelines on policy manual construction, shouldn't be in that new section 000. I actually fought to amend that a bit and have some things included because I felt they were important. The 012 contracts and bids, PSBA wanted that under the budget section. And so instead of it being in new 000, I think it'd be in 600. I forget what the new budget and finance is. Is it 600? Is the new budget and finance? Because of the history here in Neshaminy, because of what we fought to get rid of those 202 MOUs, we created that policy 104 for that back in 13. I thought it was important that that still be reflected under board responsibility. So, I lobbied my other members to have that included there, as well as budget commitment. That's just a statement of this board's philosophy of how we should respect the taxpayers. While we retired those other policies, and this was something that Mrs. Hollenbach brought up, and I had a conversation with Mr. Feather as well about this, is we want to create an area on the website, and the policy manual now is all electronic, on the website where we're going to archive those old policies so you can have a historical reference to go back and look at them. Some of those retired policies will be reincorporated into new policies in the new sectional format. I think the next meeting, if Mr. Meehan can help me out here, is 21st. And what sections are it again we'll be doing? 600 and 700, new 600 and 700, which are replacing our finance and facilities policies. So it's going to be a little confusing in the building. We're going to do our best to make sure the public stays aware of where those policies are and what they're replacing. And when it all turns over, there should be a historical record of this was our old policy 100, and it was either deleted or it was moved into new policy, 610 or whatever it be. It's going to be a little cumbersome in the beginning, but we're trying to get it done. You making fun of me again?
No, I saw Bob back up. You like starting to talk Italian there with your
Oh, I
hands.
was throwing at you. I'm sorry.
He's backing up.
Shadow boxing. As far as that goes, Mrs. Weber, on the school nurse issue, I heard you last time you come up, and keep coming. We're trying to work it out with administration. It is a budgetary issue. I can't go into the great detail of how it came up in the budget that it got moved, but we are looking for every nickel, dime, and penny, and I think I said it last time, we're down to the pennies. I am a little concerned about the situation. It's going to have to be addressed from a budgetary point of view for a long-term cure. I know you've been working with the superintendent, to do something, let's call it stopgap for lack of a better word. In the meantime, I'm not sure at this particular point how we're going to finally address it. But, regardless of whether you like the answer or don't like the answer, I want to preface that because I'm assuming you're not going to like it. The services that we are providing, and I know you've spoken about the code, is the guidance by which the PDA tells us we're responsible to provide. Whether we did more before or less before, I don't know. I'm going to be honest, I don't know. But we're going to keep working on this issue to come up with the resolution that fits the needs of our children. But I definitely say I'm sure it was from a budgetary point of view. Whether it was right or wrong, we have to now live with the consequences and try and make it right. So that's our job up here. And like I said, just keep bringing your concerns. We haven't forgotten. So thank you for coming out. And that's all I have.
I'd like to just expand on what Steve said a little bit, so thank you. With regard to policy, we are incorporating our policies into a more comprehensive policy program using the PSBA. I voted tonight the way I voted just because I believe, well, let me back up a little bit. I believe what we're doing is the right thing to do. However, I don't want us to lose our identity as Neshaminy and what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're implementing things. I believe that we're moving just a little bit too fast on some of these things, and that's the reason I voted the way I voted tonight. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't disagree with where we're going and how we're getting there. I just think we're moving just a little too fast. That's all.
I'd like to comment on the school nursing issue we have. Mrs. Weber, I know you parents are making great sacrifices to do what you're doing, to send your children to these schools. And there's one thing I can tell you, that when they started making these cuts little by little several years back, that this was an issue for me, but it was pretty much straight across the board, throughout all the school system. So I would say be an advocate, stay in front of us, and because a couple of us won't be here in another month, the board's going to be changing over. But I can tell you, Mr. Jones here will get you the answer, and I'll pick on Steve Paratano. He will be here. Stay on him. But I'll be following up on it also, as this week goes along.
Just for openness and transparency, 2 weeks ago when I came to the work session, Mr. Jones advised the board of a candidate that they had for the transportation position. I immediately told them of my relationship to that person. I had no idea that she was being considered, and that's why I abstained from the vote tonight. Even though legally I could have voted, I abstained from the vote.
All right, I'd once again like to thank Caitlin and Nikki, very well-spoken students from Maple Point this evening. Did an excellent job. November 7th, I believe the date was? 9th? let's make sure of that. I wrote it down wrong. It is, all right, November 9th. No. We might be celebrating that a few years down the road as well. Steve, I think you got some answers. Once again, like others said, we missed you. You're always the voice of the public for us when we come out and hold these committee meetings. Recently, it's been a little bit more low key with this board. We haven't had any real severe, crazy topics where we're moving the meetings to the auditorium or whatnot. But it is disheartening to see comments out there. We have these committee meetings. They're on the website. Please, come out when we start talking budget. I mean, I'd love to, look at the budgets in greater detail on our nursing programs throughout our districts and all the nurses that we supply to other. I mean, this is where you can work with the board members, work with the administration. It's a three-part triangle. I mean, you have the administration, you have the board, and you can have the public at these committee meetings, and it's a conversation. Unfortunately, in the past, we weren't able to have conversations during our meetings. We're lightening up a little bit recently. During public comment, we have addressed some of the people in the public. But like I said, we don't have 60 people signing up to vote, or to 60 people signing up to speak. But I do encourage the public to come out. I hear there's a lot of issues that people are having. Some have a lot of backbone to them that, I think should be discussed by the administration, the board, and the public. So once again, these committee meetings that, we all come out to, and I'd love to see more participation from the public. With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second, please? Mr. Burnett on a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone, and good night.